I'm Aiden,
I'm Ethan.
I'm Chris.
and today we're going to talk about the post-colonial concept of qualification that we see upon professional fields today in our post-colonial society.
Yeah, and so for me, my parents, I don't know about you guys, but personally, they want me to go to grad school just because they say, it's hard to get a job without it. And they want me to go to a school like, MIT or Columbia just because, they believe that, the better name the school has, the, more opportunities I'll have. And so I talked to my parents, and my dad's like, you should do it. This is your dream. Plus, like, you'll make way more money than if you just got an undergrad degree, right? But the problem is, personally at least, there's one big thing that comes to mind, and it's that, the grad student debt can creep up into like six figures, like 300-400K, and that's not just pocket cash, and if you're not able to pay this loan quickly, these loans just continue to grow. They just keep ballooning up. If you're not paying your loans 2 years out, some experts say that you're probably not even going to be making progress paying them down ever, and that's just straight statistics. And for example, if you're an anesthesiologist or like a doctor, it's very expensive to go to med school, right? 400K, but you'll make progress on your loans just because it's a very high-paying degree. However, there's all these other master's degree programs, such as like architecture or urban planning or film or journalism, and that payoff just isn't there. And these are still really expensive programs. These students have $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in debt, and you're making $40,000 a year. That's just not economically sustainable. Yeah. And it used to be that when graduate students took out these loans from the federal government, they could only take out so much, like $40K. But in 2005, the rules changed, where Congress created the Grad Plus loan system, which is originally intended to make grad school more accessible. However, this only made it so that these schools could, give out these massive loans, and these students, couldn't pay them off. And that was the unintended consequence. It wasn't, out of evil that the schools did this. This is just I guess is how it happened. For Columbia's master in fine arts and film, median debt's around $180,000. This is just statistics from Columbia's website. And the median annual earnings is less than $30,000. And so this is like a really paralyzing, debt if you're a student, especially like imagine you're fresh out of college and you're $180,000 in debt. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times these interest rates are as high as 8%. So if you're $180,000 in debt, a lot of times it's more than that, and you're 8% interest rate, and you're making $30,000 a year, you're going to be in debt for life.
You're trying to save up to buy a house, buy an apartment, buy a car, anything. You're going to take out loans on that too. You're working yourself into more debt.
You can't. So in my opinion, I don't think it's worth it. Unless you're going into, pre-law or you're getting like a law degree. You're like in pre-law for undergrad and you're getting a law degree or like a doctorate or something. I don't know. What do you guys think?
We kind of see like bringing it back to like post-colonialism, like our class. We see like a lot of the degrees that people hold are inherently colonial. Like the usage of the term master, it just implies like your superiority over others in a social setting, and in this case, it would be like your mastery over X subject, whether it be like an art or science, over anyone else, which puts you ahead, but sort of holds others back from achieving that status of being able to pay off such debts of like taking on that program, right. And especially when a lot of people are going into these non-lucrative industries, it's just not like you said, not sustainable over a long period of time.
Do you guys so I don't know if your parents said that as well, but like every time I ask my parents, they're like, go to grad school, like trust me, trust us, this is the way to go. Like, do your parents think that? Or like, why do you think, if they think that, why do you think so? Like, why are they saying this?
Yeah, a big part of it, I think, is the need to feel like overqualified for your job.
That's true.
Like for a lot of teachers, you need to have a master's degree in your subject. You need to have a bachelor's degree, even just to get looked at. It's no longer just enough to have a degree from a college. You need a degree of higher education. You need to prove that you went to grad school. You need to have a teaching degree specifically. Like you need all these overqualification degrees to feel like you even need to get looked at to potentially be a teacher. Now that's really a part of an issue. Like you need to feel to have all this extra merit and name when in a lot of cases, it's just pushing people more into debt and limiting how they can live their lives.
Yeah, and also like my parents didn't go to college, so I'm gonna be like the first. I'm a first gen college student basically. Yeah, and so my parents like are familiar with debt because I'm from like the inner city, so it's like they took on these big loans just to like live their lives, and I feel like they've taught me a lot about like financial literacy and like how to manage my money and what I should and shouldn't do. And my parents aren't like necessarily pushing me to go to grad school per se because they're not very familiar with like graduate level academia. Although like three of my siblings have master's degrees, and my younger brother will probably have one, like realistically. But I've always wanted to go to law school, and that's just something I've always wanted to do. And so they support me in that, but they're not very familiar with it. And I feel like since your parents like are familiar with it, I feel like there's much more emphasis on that like sort of subject in the household. And I feel like it also depends on the field you're going into. I feel like your parents wouldn't necessarily push you to go to grad school if you were pursuing something like the fine arts because it's not lucrative like we already talked about. And I don't really think you would get much out of it unless it's like your true deepest passion. And it's very difficult to become successful in that field. Whereas like in law, there are 100 law firms ranked by Vault every year where you can easily make six figures, over 200K as a first year associate, and you're getting paid the years before as a summer associate. So I feel like there's a lot more incentive to specialized degrees and the certain industries that you go into.
Let's say another big thing about law industry specifically, though, is how much of it, especially starting out, is connections and how many connections you have, who you know, who you can get an internship with. And that's, again, something that is really limited to who you know, what your connections are. So for people coming up without those kinds of connections or who don't know people, it's a lot harder to get into that and get started, even if you have, you're just as smart as everybody else.
Yeah, it's definitely not equal. I mean, we go to Cho. We know a lot of kids here. I don't want to say things are handed to them, but a lot of things are easier here than if you go somewhere else like a poor district with not the best public schools. The level of education is different. The level of opportunities you get is different, and like Chris said, like the connections you have are different.
Yeah, and I feel like going back to it, like the debt aspect is a very cyclical process. I feel like relating back to my parents, they took on a lot of debt trying to go to school, but eventually it just didn't work out. And I feel like that impact of debt is really what sort of plays a role in this like post-secondary, post-collegiate education that we see in these people. Like I feel like the debt we take on really is dependent on our passions. I think at the end of the day, if you're willing to put yourself at a deficit, because debt is a universal language. Rich people have debt, poor people have debt. Right. It's just the matter of being able to match that debt with revenue. And I feel like the way that the post-collegiate education system works is like you have to be either very wealthy or be like hyper intelligent to successfully escape that path with minimal debt. But I feel like most people, like myself, who don't really come from affluent backgrounds, are sort of put in this like disposition of choosing to further themselves and becoming this like overqualified individual who can find success in the white collar like divisions of the world, rather than someone who takes on all this debt and at the end of the day still can't find success.
Right. I mean, right, like you think about it, you're coming out of maybe 4 years of college, maybe 5 years, depending on what you're doing. You've accumulated all this debt, and now you've got to go to school for another 4 years.
Yeah.
And in some cases, double your debt or triple your debt even, depending on your interest rate, how much you can pay off, while you're not really earning much money because you're still in school. Like that's a prospect that for a lot of people is just not financially reasonable at all.
Yeah.
Because if some people can not really afford to go to college without taking out debts, because college is really expensive now.
Yeah.
You're looking at some colleges upwards of $100,000 a year in cost to go to the school, which is an insane amount for anybody, regardless of wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think about? So I mentioned something called the Grad Plus loan system, where instead of taking $40,000 out, the federal government now allows you to take any size debt, any size loan for like school purposes. Like, what do you guys think of that? Is that good natured at heart, or is that sort of like with this intent to take money from people?
I don't think it was intended to take money from people. I think, like you kind of mentioned earlier, it was intended more to allow more people to go. But I think with the way, it partially has to do with the way our inflation rates are right now. The loans from banks, they come with very, very high interest rates. And just for any loan, this is not just specific to education, any loans right now you can be crushed with.
Yeah.
And 7-8% interest can really ruin you. Like it's a crazy amount.
And I feel like things like the Grad Plus program are sort of like intended to do good, but I feel like they further tighten the bottleneck for people to find these opportunities to become more successful and find more wealth. I feel like it's a highly exploitative system, by the government, because it's very it's easy money for the government to say, hey, you owe me X amount and you're going to pay this off for the rest of your life. But B, I feel like it's a trap to lure people who genuinely want to further themselves, both academically and professionally. And I feel like they sort of fall for that trap because they have limited resources. As someone who can't afford to pay college out of pocket and don't qualify for aid, because they're I remember reading about this in an article, but there's a very gray area in terms of family income where you can or can't receive aid from certain colleges, and certain colleges are very picky about it. And then the government also says that hey, we can't help you because you make too much money, but the college is saying you're in a gray area between you make too much but you don't make enough to not qualify.
Right.
So it's
So you can't pay for the full thing, but they're not going to give you anything.
It's how much you do have to pay is still a too much of a tangible amount.
For me, I think it's definitely a loop that it's very applicable to us because we're going into undergrad and we need to think about if we're going to go to grad school. And for me personally, just because my parents have always instilled in me that you have to go to grad school, I believe it's important to, I think it's it's not necessary, but I feel like we're forced to. I mean, now you look at applying to any job. So my dad's job, he works at InterSystems, which is a server company for hospitals. And to even look at a candidate, they have to have a PhD. That's for you to even get considered for an interview. You have to have a PhD, which is an extra how many years in school? That's an insane amount, right? Yeah. And I just think, and that was a couple of years ago. I mean, now I feel like having a graduate degree is just you have to have it. It's just become so normalized, and I think job market's so competitive that you can't survive without it. And if you get one, you're in crippling debt. So it's like a balance that you have to really play it smart.
I think kind of like we mentioned earlier, it really does depend on what field you go into. If you want to go into finance, for an example. I have a lot of friends who are going to finance. I've got some friends who are graduating college now, and they already have jobs lined up. They're not going for a post-grad degree in finance or management, accounting, whatever their degrees are. Their most important thing for their businesses is prior experience and getting more experience working. They don't need the prerequisite of more education. So that is another thing where I think it does depend on what you're going into, but a lot of the and finance also isn't really a huge postgraduate degree. You don't see many people with doctorates in finance.
Yeah, most people just go for an MBA after a couple of years of being in the industry, not straight out of school.
I mean, what do you guys think about the role of gender in these professional fields? Because I know, for example, a traditionally female role or a female job is nursing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what do you guys think about this? Because I know, if you, I don't know, I don't want to say the incorrect time period, but like let's say sometime in the 1900s, it was a norm for women to be more stay at home while the men worked, and so you technically only had one household income. And this transition to having a dual household income, it could be taken as, you know, just a societal shift in norms, but it also could be taken as out of necessity as well. You know, what if these families are, you know, all of a sudden, you know, you need to have two sources of income just to support your family, and that could be, and this could be just keep going further, you know, and that's the reason why, you know, now you got to have both your parents have to work, but also both of them have to have a graduate degree in order to get these jobs. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I think it's been getting a lot better. I think we see a lot more women in fields that were really closed off before. I think particularly in now things like finance and law. My aunt works as a lawyer. My other aunt works as a tax attorney. These are things that were not considered female professions for many, many years, and it's changed, and I think it's changed for the better, and there's a lot of smart people who can do all the jobs. So I think that part has changed, but there's still a lot of work. I think particularly in finance and economics, it is still, even at Choate we see it, it is still vastly dominated by men.
Yeah.
All of our econ teachers are male. Most of the higher level econ classes past macro and micro, which tend to be a little bit more balanced, are still male. Like there's maybe, if you get lucky, 3 females in a grade that'll keep taking the econ classes, which is
That's been my
unfortunate.
experience here.
Yeah.
Like I went from macro to micro to international, and it did really dwindle down. And like sort of bringing it back to that like bottleneck idea, sort of like tradition is also a big thing, especially at like a private school where we are. I feel like tradition and accessibility are two very intertwined ideas, and I feel like accessibility ranging from like who you know, what you do, what you're interested in, but also like what you are allowed to do, or what like the societal biases that we see within the Choate community is very like, oh, girls tend to like more like push themselves towards like psychology, sociology, things like that, like very like heavily social science field. But like you see guys like sort of dominating, even like the math club is like straight guys. It's very interesting to see. And I feel like that's just like something that we're starting to break out of. Like there are a lot of things at Choate that are changing. Like even in my time here, like a lot of things have changed. I feel like it's very obvious to see these things, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, things are changing, but we have to make them change a little bit faster.
We can cut this out.
Yeah, you need to go fix that.
What is that?
Is it your phone?
That's someone's phone.
Sorry. Zach, I'm recording a podcast. You should interrupted it.
You, Zach Star.
I'm sorry. Did this podcast more important than your last round proposal? Okay.
Welcome back. So Aiden just talked about accessibility, but the one other debate that's going on right now with student debt specifically is who should be responsible for bearing that debt. Some argue that students who choose to pursue some of the less lucrative fields should bear the consequences of having to pay all that debt, because they'll just accumulate more debt than students who's going into maybe law or finance, which have a lot higher initial salaries. While others argue for more support for them, because graduate students are often considered very smart and they're choosing to pursue higher education, and that is something that we should value as a society and give our support to them.
And do you think that's something that the universities should do, something that even the government should do? Because I know like there's been talk that the government should provide federal student debt relief. And I think that's sort of come a little bit. I don't know. Wasn't there something with Biden who did relieve some debt? And I think that's definitely possible. It's just there's so many students. Like consider how many Americans are there? Over 200 million, right? And we could say that that's fair, over 200 million. It could
It's a
be
lot
way
more than 200 million. I think it's like 700 million.
Yeah.
Right. Let's say
I think you're off by a little bit there.
let's say at one time, we could just underball everything just to show the scale of this. Like 1 million graduate students. That's fair, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a fair number. 1 million graduate students with $100,000 each. That's an insane amount of money. That's an insane amount of money for even the government to be able to pull out of their pockets and pay off. And I believe that at the end of the day, it should be the universities that do have to do something about this, whether that's make it a little bit less expensive or provide aid, because universities really love giving undergraduate students aid, because that is how they attract these students in. You got accepted to our school, here's another $20,000 off. That's attractive to students. But as a grad student, for example, you've already been to an undergraduate school. These universities don't focus, like I said, universities pull out of their pockets. Columbia spent $492 million on financial aid, and the majority of that was to undergraduate students. And it left a very slim amount for graduate students as support for them. And it's not sustainable for graduate students.
So do you think that colleges should be giving the same amount of aid to a student that they had coming in as an undergraduate? Or do they need to look at it and reflect it again? Because when you're coming in as an undergrad, you're often, maybe 18, 19, 20, coming out of high school, maybe you're likely more still living with your parents. But now coming out of college, going into postgrad, you're probably living by yourself, maybe 22, 23, somewhere in there.
I think it should be proportional. If you're paying, $20,000 a year for undergraduate, and you're also paying $20,000 a year for graduate, you get the same amount of aid for both. It should be proportional. That's what I believe. Universities shouldn't prioritize undergraduates' aid over graduate student aid.
I kind of disagree with that. I feel like we're all intelligent enough to know that going to graduate school and pursuing some form of a higher degree is a conscious decision.
Right.
Like, okay, to be qualified enough for a majority of the jobs in America, you need a bachelor's degree. That's like no ifs, ands, or buts. Right. If you want to live, I won't say sustainably, not comfortably, but to have a life, I feel like you do need some form of either undergraduate education or some extensive background in the professional world. Like you've been working for a bit, so that companies can verify that you are someone who's capable of completing this task that they want you to do. But I feel like a lot of graduate students pursue the degrees because we know that they're prestigious. Like if you have a grad degree, you're something serious. Like you know what you're doing. Like Dr. Lopez has a PhD. Most jobs are not turning him down. But if I'm a student with the same degree, but in the bachelor form, they're like,
Yes, Lopez. Aiden just called you very smart.
Yeah,
you should be proud of that. He shouted you out.
Very smart guy. But I'm just saying, I feel like it is a very conscious decision, and almost every graduate student will tell you that the only things that came from receiving their higher education degree were, for the majority, a very good thing because it made them a much more favorable candidate in the professional world. But at the same time, say you are a fine arts person, like we talked about, like someone who's going into digital design, there aren't many jobs that are going to pay you 6 figures plus unless you're working off of commission and your clients are very, very interested in what you're making. But at the same time, I feel like the government should assist in some way, shape, or form, but I don't feel like it is their inherent responsibility to fully assist these students because they knew what they were getting themselves into. It's it's a decision you have to consciously make that at the end of the day, it's more helpful than it is harmful, but at the same time, the negative effects can be very, very apparent, especially later in life when you're trying to do things like buy a house, pay off a car, things like things of that nature, start a family. It's very expensive for kids, almost $70,000 a year, but things like that, the things you wouldn't really think about as an undergraduate student, I'm just going to college, just doing this, maybe meet a girl or a guy or someone else. But like those things aren't on your mind. But going to grad school is a very, very conscious choice. Like you very much have to deliberate on it because a lot of grad programs are very, very selective, especially if you do want to find some success in a field.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that wraps it up. Is a graduate degree worth it? There's a lot of disagreement.
I think my official verdict is it depends. If you know it's going to help you, then there's no reason you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But if you know there's a very, very high chance that you'll be very harmed by this decision, and it isn't something that's just in the cards for you, maybe at the moment or in the near future, but eventually it could be something that you do. But I feel like, especially if you're very young and there are things you want to do and you don't see it playing out in your favor, I don't think it's very helpful. But at the same time, it could be a life changer. You can meet someone, your future employer, and be set for life. But
so
yeah.
is this something that you think we need to rework, the graduate education system as a whole?
Yeah, 100%. This is
I mean, I think we do need to rework it. The question is how.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of smart people. I'll use America specifically because that's kind of our realm. It's where we've lived our whole lives. I would say there are a lot of smart people in America, but a lot of smart people tend to disagree a lot of the time. Like we disagreed, I would say, a fair bit, even though it's an idea that we all worked on together. But at the same time, it's like it can be done. It can get done. Yeah. It's just a matter of time and effort. It's something we have to consciously put our effort into.
PPL Drizzy.
Wait, what is it actually? Wait,
Where's my phone?
Okay, let's actually think of that.
BBL Drizzy.
I'll just say like at the end of the day.
BBL Drizzy. BBL